Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the November 13th meeting of the Portland Board of Education Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee. I'm Sarah Bryden. I'm the committee chair. It is 4:32 p.m. and we are getting started. We have all the committee members here. We have myself. We have Board Member Opperman, Board Member Figdor, Board Member Youssef. We also have with us Board Chair Lentz. And then from the staff, we have Superintendent Scallon, we have Helene DeBartolomeo, and we have Rob and Katie from BerryDunn. So we are all set to have a wonderful meeting. Going to sort of lay out broad strokes of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start with public comment. We are going to have an update from BerryDunn on audit activity. We're going to have an opportunity for committee members and any other board members who might join us to pose questions about the budget so that we can start preparing and becoming knowledgeable about the budget for the fiscal year 25 budget process that's gearing up. We're going to get a year-to-date fiscal year 24 update, and we're going to get an update on collaboration with the city. So it's going to be a really, really fun 90 minutes, really wonderful. And let's see, I'm going to check and see if we have 0 attendees. So I'm not going to read all of the public comment rules and process and procedure content, but because there are no attendees, there's nobody to raise their hand. So I'm going to open and close public comment right now. So public comment is closed. So we will move right along to, actually what I'll do is Superintendent Scallon, I'll hand it off to you so you can sort of tee up the BerryDunn conversation if that works.
That's great. I really appreciate it. Must have been about a little over a month ago at a board meeting. We had BerryDunn come and join us and present on the work they are doing. That work I think of as threefold. One is around our audit preparation. That is a backward-looking report that is done by an outside evaluator to tell us where our financial systems are strong and where they need work. And there's work that every organization does before an audit to make sure that they're prepared and ready. And so we have BerryDunn supporting us with that. The second is around helping us with some of our internal practices and making sure that we have strong internal practices. Part of that comes naturally from their work, right? That if they're digging in preparation for an audit, they're able to say to us, hey, here are areas where you could improve and streamline your practice. And then the third is doing some of the frontline support and work that we in the district need help with right now as we climb out of some of the challenges from this past year. And so BerryDunn's been doing those three things. About a month and a half ago, they came to the board and shared a presentation on their work. And this is the update meeting to share with you on the finance committee where we're at and how those things are progressing. And so I'm excited to have Katie and Rob here with us. And we'll turn it over to them for their presentation.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. We've got a quick slide deck I'd love to share if I'm allowed to. I think I am. Let's try it. You all seeing it? Thumbs up? No. How about now?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. So we've got Superintendent Scallon. As he mentioned, we're happy to be here to talk about our readiness engagement. Katie is going to give us a quick update about, sort of where we're at, pull up the timeline and sort of talk through all the things we've been able to accomplish and some things that are kind of, in process. We've got a slide on some additional challenges that I think we're in a good place to help you folks with respect to the retirement focused stuff. I'll touch on that for a bit and then we'll take some questions. Katie, I will hand it off to you on the first slide.
Yes, perfect. Can you go one more?
Yep, gotcha.
Perfect. All right. So this slide may look familiar from our last presentation. We did just want to start by giving a quick summary of what we were engaged to do. So really with our project planning, that was when we had some kickoffs with leadership as well as the finance team. We were really gaining an understanding of how things were working within the Portland Public Schools, who did what, as well as assessing the current state of where things were reconciled through. Phase 2 was really our accounting assistance and reconciliation preparation, which is really where we still are in this current date. So we developed a month-end, year-end checklist that can be used by the team moving forward in terms of preparing reconciliations and carry on after we conclude our engagement. We've also been working to perform reconciliations of key balance sheet areas. We're working with the team to identify, are there resources within the school department that can assist with some of these reconciliations, really doing a lot of research behind the scenes for the reconciliations themselves, and really being available to answer any questions as they arise. Our pre-audit work, that's really where we're developing schedules for the audit, as well as doing some high-level overview. So we are doing some of that right now where we're really looking at your year-end numbers as they stand today to identify, are there any accounts that there aren't reconciliations for? Are there any accounts that still need to be touched upon? Anything that when we look at relationships between different accounts, do things not look right? So that's part of where we're at right now as well, is doing that really high-level overview. And then phase 4, as the audit starts happening in early December, will be available as a resource to work with the school department, help the city with any questions, as well as work with the external auditors. And so now moving on to the next slide, which is really our overall timeline.
Hey, do you want to mention our the coordination we've had with the external auditors, sort of the meetings, just to...
Yes, yep. So we have set up reoccurring meetings with the auditors on a monthly basis just to really talk through any questions that come up as it relates to the historical knowledge of them being the auditors for, I think, the last 3 years at this point. So those have been very helpful in order to, whereas within the school department, there's been significant turnover. So documentation that was provided last year, for instance, for the audit, the individuals that prepared that support, that maybe had that support on their computer, are no longer there. So we're able to work with the auditors to get examples of what they received in the prior year, as well as really be able to get the work papers so we know we're starting at the right spot as we're moving into the fiscal year. So that's been very valuable to have those meetings just to ask policy questions as well, because obviously they do the audit from the city perspective. So there's certainly city policies that impact how the accounting is done from a school department perspective. So they're able to provide some of that guidance as well as we've been moving through the process. So our timeline itself, so we did include this in the initial presentation, and there's certainly been areas that have shifted. We are behind in terms of where we want to be with what reconciliations are done. We certainly have some reconciliations when we think about, if we look at the third block down, so that was the starting in August, we were hoping to have it concluded by Halloween. In terms of cash, there's some research that's being done by the school department for some of the outstanding reconciling items that the city had identified. Grants, I would say, was one of our biggest tasks that we've been working on with the school department overall. The school department was, in some cases, was a year behind on grant billing when we started working with the school in July. There were some grants that were anywhere from 2 to 3 quarters behind on their billings. So we've been working closely with the school department to identify what grants does the school department have, where are they in their reimbursement process, because many of the grants, you spend the funds and then you submit for reimbursement at a later date. So the funds had been spent, there just had not been any reimbursement submitted either to the state or to the feds. So that was something that we really had to map out. What grants did the school department have? What system was the reimbursements flowing through, because you have multiple systems that grants are paid through. So I'd say this was really where the bulk of our work has been done to help not only help get caught up, but identify at a high level what grant funds are even out there, where are they at in terms of billings, collections, in order to really move into doing some reconciliation. So at this point, we're at the point where we're doing the reconciliations. The grant spreadsheet has been prepared to identify the applicable revenues and expenses, as well as grant funds. The reimbursements have been submitted to the state as well as the feds in certain instances. So that's something that really right now we're working with the team to identify what are your year-end, your receivable balances, what are the money that as of 6/30 was owed to the school department. So that's, I'd say, where the legwork has been done. A lot of research and time has been put in from both a BerryDunn perspective, but then there's certainly been a lot of resources within the school department that we've been able to utilize in doing research, as well as really just trying to gain an understanding and wrap our hands around all of the grant funds that the school has. So that's close in terms of really we're at the final reconciliation stage of making sure that the correct receivables are recorded and really be able to check that off our list. And I'd say the next week. Accounts payable is an area that is completely done. Our team has worked through those reconciliations, and then compensated absences is an area that there were certainly early on, we were going to be involved in that work. And then internally, there was discussion of another individual within the school department taking that on. And now we're going to be working through some reconciliation issues as it relates to compensated absences over the next couple of weeks. The next bullet for accounting assistance was the accrued payroll, capital assets, leases, and then Sabatas, which is software contracts. Accrued payroll is all completed. Capital assets, leases, and software subscriptions. We've had some conversations with people outside of the finance team that are responsible for gathering that documentation for us. We do have requests out to them that we have not heard back. So that's really, we were hoping to have those areas wrapped up, but we do have some lingering open items with some people that, like I said, are outside of the finance team to be able to bring those areas to a conclusion. And then the last item is your prepaids, other current assets, inventories, and transfers. So those are really part of our overall high-level trial balance review because those areas are not overly significant to the school department. So we're looking at many of those areas in the next week in order to verify that the reconciliations exist, as well as be able to determine if there's anything that we need to investigate further. So the asterisk here is obviously what point we are in terms of the calendar. So we do have a couple weeks in order to really get this work done. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be a very busy couple of weeks in terms of getting the work done for the auditors. But certainly it's something that our team is prepared and has the resources. And we do meet as a team internally at least weekly, if not more than that. So really tomorrow's meeting will be making sure that we're able to get through all of the areas that are still open. And like I said, there's certainly some areas that we're waiting on some information from individuals outside of finance. But then there's some work that we'll be doing really starting with Helene as it relates to compensated absences that will be kicking up this week. And then another item that isn't necessarily on this slide, but I know when I was speaking with Ryan last week, there certainly were some prior year audit findings that came out of last year's audit, as well as there were several comments that were repeated for several years within your audit reports. So one thing from a financial statement audit standpoint, when the audit is prepared or performed, it's looking at your full calendar year or your full fiscal year. So from July 1 of 22 to June 30th of 23. So we were brought on really in July. So we're helping get reconciliations ready. Obviously, we're adding some controls as it relates to those year-end numbers, but there will still be some prior year findings as it relates to last year's findings being repeated this year, as some of these controls were not in place the full year. So when your auditors look at tests, they're not just looking at your 6/30 year-end numbers to see were reconciliations prepared. Does it show an evidence of a preparer and reviewer? They're going to look at was February prepared timely, or was it done all in June in order? So that's one thing that we do just want to be aware of, is that there were some internal control issues that were identified last year. There were some policies and procedures, areas that were certainly going to be leaving the school department with some processes, as well as some guidance in terms of really how those findings will be resolved in fiscal year 24. But that's really the hard part, is there's certainly a lot of this work was catching up and working with Helene in order to come up with a plan for really how to make sure that these issues do not continue to carry into fiscal year 24. So that's something that we did just want to bring to the committee's attention in terms of just setting the expectations as it relates to really what the auditors will be reporting on and that time period aspect of the prior year audit findings. And at that point, that's all I have for a current year update, so I can turn it over to Rob to really talk about the next phase.
Yeah, and before I do that, does anyone have questions? I know that was a lot. We talked very specifically about very specific accounting areas, and I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with sort of what we brought to the table.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that opportunity for us to ask questions at this sort of midpoint. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple thoughts in the reimbursement schedule of grants in the past year. Are they the kinds of grants and kinds of situations that may be scheduled in the future and maintain the schedule that you discovered? Is one question. And talking about grants in trying to reconcile the grants, are some of the grants centrally monitored, or some of them monitored in various different schools? And if that has been a problem, and I wondered if that was related to the assets. And I'm just wondering who's not doing their job with the capital assets. So there's 3 questions. I don't know if we could start with the scheduling.
Yes, in terms of the grant schedule, that is the intention, is that the grants will be done on a monthly basis going forward. You certainly have grants that one-offs that will say we want them to submit for reimbursement on a quarterly basis, but monthly is the best practice in terms of being able to do it. I know that Clarice is the accountant internally that's tasked with doing the grant reimbursement. She did not start until July. So that's the other piece too, is she has been catching up on a full fiscal year, even though she didn't even start during the fiscal year. So that's something that we're certainly giving her the tools and the resources that she'll be able to do this on a monthly basis. It will just be part of, 10 days after the month end, really starting to do that process in terms of submitting for reimbursement. So that is the hope, that the schedule will be used going forward and be able to be updated as new grants are added. From a decentralization standpoint, there's certainly grant activity as it relates to the spending that does happen at an individual school level. You do have grant managers, so you have the finance side of it, but then also there's the programmatic side of all of these grants. So typically the programmatic side is somewhat decentralized, but then from a finance perspective, all of your expenses flow through the general ledger that make their way to finance. So from a billing perspective, all grants except for one are actually billed out of the superintendent's office through finance. There's only one grant. It's related to adult education that is done and billed separately. I don't know going forward if that's something that really is the best place for that to be billed. I don't have enough historical knowledge of why it's being billed outside of it, but that's the only grant that we're aware of that is billed outside of the superintendent's office. From that perspective. And in terms of capital assets, leases, and software, so that's really with the operations team, and just being able to, a lot of that information has been maintained by the city in the past. And part of the reason why it's been maintained by the city in the past is because of the turnover that occurred at the school department, in terms of just they picked up the slack when they did not have, when there weren't resources within the school department to pull the information. So this year we really did a deep dive to look at the schedules of your assets to determine do you actually have all of these assets, or are you carrying a school bus that was sold 2 years ago? So that's something that there's really a lot of questions that are being asked. There's certainly a lot of construction projects that have occurred that cross calendar or fiscal years. So it's just making sure that they're being reported properly within the schedules. And that's really an operations standpoint. And there's certainly some information that's needed from the individual schools. When you think about some of your assets, maybe within school lunch, for instance, is a big area where there's assets that are purchased. But it's certainly more of an operations standpoint in terms of what's open there.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm not saying that Warren is not doing her job at all. God goodness, she's got to go and pick up the pieces. So,
yes, she's working with a lot of external parties to get some of that information. As it relates to, like I said, the school lunch is a big area where there's assets that are purchased that she doesn't know what assets are still in a particular kitchen.
Okay.
I guess that's a pretty specific example, but yes, that's a lot of your assets.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a quick question before we move on. I'm also watching for more hands to get raised, but my quick question also has to do with the grant billing issue and the year lag time. I want to make sure that I'm understanding what the issue fundamentally is. Can you confirm whether my understanding is correct, that it's essentially that it's a matter of placing the monies received in the correct fiscal year is for the purposes of this audit? Is that what the issue fundamentally is?
At this point, I'd say 2 months ago, the issue was the fact that the bills nothing had been invoiced. So now there's accounting rules in terms of when those get recorded. So now it's looking, and they're very specific from a governmental standpoint. If you look at your receivables you were a for-profit versus a governmental entity, it's different in terms of when you recognize that revenue, unfortunately. But that's really part of it, is making sure that those revenues and receivables are, yes, reported in the correct year, but there's been a lot of work to get to that point from a reconciliation standpoint of when we really got in there. There were certain grants that hadn't been billed since September of 2022.
Okay.
So it was identified. So there was
get the money in, and now it's allocated to the correct fiscal year. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for helping me to understand that. I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so I will turn it back over to you folks.
Great, thank you. So as we've sort of made our way to closing, the sort of closing months of our help, and I'm kind of, I want to watch my words here, because I don't want to communicate anything that hasn't been communicated to you, or that isn't consistent or truthful, because honestly, it's really it's kind of a particularly with Maine PERS, it's a bit of a moving target within the last week. But over the last week or so, Superintendent Scallon and Helene have reached out to us to kind of think about extending what we're doing in terms of help to a few different areas. Maine PERS being the biggest one with reporting. Maine PERS is the Maine retirement system. You folks report to them. They manage everything in terms of coming up your retirement, actuary calculations, and also administering the retirement, so paying the retirement. Accurate reporting is super important to them. It just so happens that we are the audit firm for Maine PERS, so we're kind of uniquely situated between both of you, and I think are in a unique spot to be able to facilitate correct reporting, cut down any of the slowdown that might happen in that process, and Ryan and his team have asked us to do that. Same sort of thing for voluntary retirement accounts. These are like the 401k type accounts, and then calculation of vacation and sick accruals to spend some time doing that, sort of as an extension of the things that we've been doing before. I'll pause there. I'm hoping I characterized that in a way that was appropriate, Ryan and Helene, but
Yeah, let me add a little bit of color and a little bit of context on this. So there are, as we make the transition to ADP and payroll around ADP, some of our internal data and mechanisms will be cleaner and better. And we have a lot of cleanup that we continue to work on and do from past school years. And the three that are up there are the three biggest sort of challenges that we have that are outstanding. The first is around Maine PERS. So every month we report to Maine PERS who was employed by Portland Public Schools that qualifies and is part of Maine PERS. And then Maine PERS on their end reconciles it with what they anticipate. And oftentimes there'll be a little bit of difference, but then it gets reconciled, it gets corrected, and then folks have that credit and that time showing up in Maine PERS. There's a challenge where our reporting for a long time now actually has not been accurate. And so there is cleanup that is happening on this to make sure that we have the right information in the system so that our current staff and recent retirees qualify and receive the right Maine PERS retirement. The second piece is around the voluntary retirement accounts. So we have some staff that are not in Maine PERS that participate in a 403B type structure. And we have people that are in Maine PERS that choose to also participate in a 403B. That's voluntary retirement accounts. Those payments, as I understand it, are up to date. What is actually outstanding there is last year there was time where we should have made a deposit into somebody's retirement account, but it was delayed for multiple months. There's a process that the IRS has that's basically a calculator that says if you were supposed to get the money in October of 2022 and you didn't get it until December of 2022, how much lost interest earnings would you have gained if it was in your retirement account at that time? And so it is really figuring out that calculation. And then the third is, and this may be too in the weeds, but we have done our accruals, our vacation, sick days, personal days, sort of side to side with our payroll, but not in an integrated way. And so we've usually done payroll and then reconciled the vacation and sick days outside of it. And so, as all of you know, that has not resulted in where people have accurate and correct 100% of the time vacation and sick accruals in the system. And so this is making sure that we have the right number of days for individuals. And this is especially helpful and timely as we move to ADP and making sure that that's correct. The new ADP system, will certainly not a silver bullet, will help as we've cleaned up some of the data for Maine PERS. The voluntary is not an ongoing piece, it's a backward-looking piece. And then ADP will help when it comes to vacation and sick days, as it will happen at the same time as payroll in an integrated process. So that's what's going on with those. And we thought it was important that as BerryDunn has learned our system, has access to it, we really needed to get to a spot where these things were correct and done. And as I think of, like, put to bed. And so that's why we asked BerryDunn to help in that work.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead. Oh, you're muted.
Not a bad thing sometimes. I'm glad BerryDunn is in on all that, because I know how close and dear this is to many people who work here. Question is on both PERS and the voluntary update. How far back, how many years, how many months, how many people, ballpark, are we going to have to determine the percent interest we must add to that in the case of the voluntary? And I guess that would be my first question. And the voluntary one, how bad is the percent interest payment addendum? I don't know what your term would be. How bad is it? Please.
So I'm going to ask Helene to give you a sense of the scale in terms of number of folks,
Mhm.
how far back. I'll just put in two pieces first before she answers. In terms of the voluntary, right? So the market hasn't been great
Mhm.
for a little while now. And so I played around with the calculator just to figure out what sort of penalty, for lack of a better word, or lost earnings we were really talking about. They were pretty insignificant.
Right.
They're earned money and folks deserve it. And so we will make it right. And in many cases, it was in the less than $40 type window. That said, again, we're going to make it right. And I feel better. On the Maine PERS part, what's I think become clear to all of us is that this has been going on and is an issue for a while. Helene can share with you some engagement with Maine PERS that goes back many years. We right now, I think, are talking about some work that is March and forward, but I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, so let me pass it to Helene.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. So there's two pieces of the Maine PERS. First piece would be what we're asking BerryDunn to review for us. That piece starts from April of 2023 to current, and we've actually asked them to stay to assist us through December 31st, since we will be in ADP in January. Then the idea is that ADP will be set up in a way that will correctly report the information for us. Because the information within the current system is so messy, we've asked BerryDunn to help us through December. Now, the piece with that, there will not be any interest that we need to provide to Maine PERS for that portion, because we're giving them estimated payments. So what we're doing is, as we're collecting the funds for each of our employees per pay period, usually what would happen is Maine PERS would have us report that information on a monthly basis. So, for instance, we would be just about due to report for October's collection of deductions and contributions for Maine PERS to employees for the month of October. So that's usually due the 15th day of the following month. So what we've done is calculated those estimated payments from April of 2023 through the end of October, and we've submitted those payments to them. I've had a couple of conversations with Maine PERS. That's the piece we asked BerryDunn to review. The other piece, we're working on it with Maine PERS specifically. They're looking at a particular month only because of a retiree called and asked about something specific. And that's when everything came undone in regards to that May of 2017 that you're discussing. Maine PERS hasn't given us any direction on what's going to happen there, but she has advised me that what most likely will happen is, if they've determined that they're overpaying some retirees and underpaying others, they'll hold harmless the ones they're overpaying, and then the ones that they're underpaying, they will have the district be the ones that pay in the difference for that. What that amount looks like, or what that amount's going to be, I don't know yet, because we haven't resolved that issue with them right now. So there's still more to come on that piece. And then in regards to the voluntary retirement, that is just a small portion of a small window when that happened last year, when that employee in payroll was out and all of those payments got missed. So we're just looking at a point in time. Voluntary retirement is on time now. So we're not looking, this is not a forward-looking piece. This is just a moment in time. We're probably going to take November of last year through, or not November, the whole last year, fiscal year, and just look at it in total and determine what that looks like for those employees in those positions. And just to give you an idea of how many people we're talking about in each. So in total, we have about 1,700 employees in the district. and about 1,300 of those are in Maine PERS. So that kind of gives you the volume of employees that we're dealing with, that we're trying to correct and ensure that we're reporting properly.
Thank you very, very much.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we can keep going.
That's it for us. In terms of slide deck, anyway.
Board Chair Lentz, go ahead.
Just appreciation for all the information that's being shared, and Helene, your commitment to kind of getting to the bottom of everything feels really good. So I know that it's probably frustrating and challenging, but just many appreciations to the work that you're doing to get us where we need to go. And my question to BerryDunn folks is, how are we making sure that the systems that are being set up and the controls are then being implemented, and like, what are the checks and balances to the systems that are being set up so that they will be sustained? I know ADP is part of that, but I would assume that there's others.
Yeah, I mean, Board Chair Lentz, can I redirect that question slightly? Because I believe that question, well, BerryDunn is helping us with the design and making sure that we're aware of where there are weaknesses. That level of accountability and making sure that it is implemented correctly moving forward really sits on Helene and myself. And so we will be sharing more of that update tomorrow. But part of that is about the work Helene's done to staff the team. And so we now do have a payroll manager and a purchasing manager. And so there's some capacity to make sure that we're actually following the procedures. Second is Helene has started working with both her department as well as others to make sure that we have standard operating procedures that are clearly followed and implemented. And so I would say that question is one that really sits on Helene and I. And I don't know if Helene wants to add anything more, but I would just say that that's where I would ask this committee to really hold us accountable, and why we use this committee as an opportunity to share exactly where we're at, where we're having successes, and where we need to continue to improve our practices.
Super. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ryan, and yes, thank you, Helene, very much. I guess my concern is that in our hiring, and you're setting it up, which look, I've been looking at that. It's been good things being going in there, and working with HR. Is there enough redundancy if someone goes out sick? I mean, that's the piece that, whatever system you have set up, what happens when something is in the disaster situation, so unforeseen circumstances. So I guess, and I know there was some comment about that the process is going to be helped with HR. That was a problem before, I think, if I recall, and members of the board can clarify this, if I don't remember things correctly, but we had issues with pocketing of situations and people who didn't know how to do what they were doing it. So I guess I just have, those are my concerns, and I would hope that we are set up for those at all.
No, I honestly, I totally respect what you're saying, and I'm the same person. I'm the same way. I'm that type of person that wants to make sure that more than one person knows how to do it, including myself. Ryan's kind of been trying to dabble into the finance department, I guess, for job security reasons. But the whole plan is definitely, having 2 payroll specialists, number one. I just started a new purchasing manager, and so I'm actually kind of showing her some information on even position control, so she can kind of be that backup person. I'm trying to make sure that I have a really strong-handed staff that anybody can jump in at any time. It will only help them in their own job as well when they're doing something. It's it makes it very nice because you make the connection. When I started in the school district down in Florida, like I told you before, I started out as the grant accountant, became then I became the budget analyst, then I became the accounting manager, then I became the director, and then the CFO. Going through all of those pieces made me realize how interconnected all of those positions within the department are. And by showing this to my staff and helping them understand how we affect each other, I really think it's going to really strengthen our department. I really feel that we're at this point really disconnected because we have a lot of very new employees that haven't had the opportunity to really work with anybody. I mean, I have staff that are excited when I call them into the office because they're just ready to just like dig into the work. So it's really exciting to see that they're, instead of being afraid, most people are afraid when their boss calls them in the office. These people are excited when I call them in the office. So we're going to be in a good place. Again, it's just getting everybody on board. We're in the process of learning a new system. We're trying to get onboarded into ADP, and everybody's learning in that process. But we're also trying to make sure we're not failing in our current process. So there's a million and one things going on, and it's exciting, and we'll get there. But the way that I've managed to build this team is going to be that everyone's going to know a little bit of everyone else's job.
Well, kudos to you, to your team. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, I will. I will also echo, appreciation and gratitude for all the great information that's been shared. And just picking up on that last conversational thread, Helene, love the redundancy and the cross training. And because you're new, you don't yet know that I'm the person who also says, and write everything down. Documentation processes. I'm sure you're doing that, but I will always say that. I want to check in and it looks like the questions on this particular part of the meeting are winding down. So I want to check in on timing also around, Superintendent Scallon, that we have until 6:00. The next thing up on the agenda is gathering our questions for fiscal year 25 budget process. In terms of what is remaining after that, do you want to set a time box or, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Helene, I think 15 minutes for this next part, realizing it's going to be an iterative process would be good. And that will leave 30 minutes for the FY24 and the council work, with the city. So I don't think that'll take too long. So I think 30 minutes would be good. I think 15 minutes for this piece would be great. Can I put a little bit of framing on this piece and then you jump in and tell me if I'm wrong, or do you want to do it?
So I'm happy to have you do it, but should we let Rob and Katie go?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all of you. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Take it away.
Yeah, so we've been wanting to have this conversation last month, and then we ran out of time, and so we want to do it now, which is, as we go into, as Chair says, we're always in budget season, but as we are in budget season and we're thinking about what questions the board is interested in us exploring, we'd love to hear from you now. What questions are top of mind? What potential savings or investments are you thinking about that you would like us to do some financial analysis of? And it doesn't need to be exhaustive, right? We can add to the list later. But knowing what are some of the initial topics provides us space and Helene's team space to start to do that research and to be able to share it back with you in a timely manner. And we would then use the future financial committees to share those pieces. And so I know there's been lists of questions that are out there. They feel a little bit dated to me, if only because I wasn't here when they were generated. They may still be the right list. But wanted to get those questions out there in the space.
Super. Okay. So 15 minutes. Here we go. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I find this question a little bit challenging because I feel like we're missing the current context So without a snapshot of what the projection is, and I know it's certainly hard without the without details from the state, and until we actually get the state projection early next year, we won't have a really solid idea of where we stand. But right now, Helene, I know there's so much that you're getting set up, and so but I find this question hard without knowing, without having a firmer sense of what what our outlook is in terms of what the shortfall might be. I think the last time we looked at those numbers was probably, I don't know, 9 months ago, or more. It was during our last budget process, as far as I remember. And I might be wrong on that, so someone correct me. And then I also wonder, we asked staff and the community in a survey for their ideas in terms of what creative options they saw for addressing our budget challenge going into next year. And I don't think that we've gotten any report back on that data. So that's another data point that I think I would need to see, is like, what's our staff and community saying? And then I do have some specific ideas, but I just wanted to put out that I find it a little bit challenging to not have that context in order to start to address this question.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess Superintendent Scallon or Helene, can you just confirm my understanding that there's going to be a shortfall? And so, like, whether it's big, medium, small, like we're going to have to find savings. And so, to Board Member Figdor's point, it's a little nebulous in terms of the number, but am I correct in thinking that there will certainly need to be this work in order to cut costs because of a shortfall that's nearly certain to happen?
Just for the fact that we know that the SRF is going away in September, it's just a known fact because of the way we budgeted some of our employees into that to kind of cover our costs in the general fund. So, I mean, I wouldn't look at this as needing a dollar amount, only because we're talking about just creating a list and exploring and determining what could work or what couldn't work, because in not all instances are we going to be able to have what that amount's going to be, unless we have some interest in areas that you ask us to look into. This is just an exploratory section where we're just asking if there's something specific that the committee wants us to review and circle back to. It doesn't necessarily even mean that we're looking for you to provide us with some cost savings, but if there's some processes or programs within the budget that you have questions about, that you want more clarity on, just to understand why we're funding it or how it becomes funded, it's all those type of exploratory questions.
Super. Thank you so much. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Okay, I have one particular.
I just have, sorry, Julie. Sorry, Board Member Opperman, to interrupt. But could I also have the second part of my question addressed, which is, can we get the data on the recommendations made in response to our survey of staff and the community as to opportunities that they saw to cut our budget?
Yeah, we can definitely give that to you. I have it. I have this vague memory that it was shared in one of the weekly updates, but based on head shaking, that tells me it wasn't. And so, yeah, we'll put it in this week's update so that you have it. You will be able to see both areas that they recommended that we not touch. And to, sort of conversely invest in, and then also areas of potential creative solutions.
Super. Thanks. Looking forward to seeing that. Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. I guess look at this in two places, all of which are related to student success, either academically or socially. And that is and I've talked to a few people about in fact, several people about the curriculum that is in place or that people want to have in place. So at this point, looking at a shortfall, which investments in curriculum need continuous financing in order to maintain or increase success? I think of the primarily literacy at this point, because I know there's a lot of PD that's involved in making sure this happens. So that's one of the pieces that I was thinking of. And in a similar way, I guess the question is, we have social, emotional, social work, different individuals and programs that we are looking at or have had related to student, I don't like the word behavior, but student spirit or confidence. And which of those have we had, which are identified as very successful, which are identified as not successful. So that would be a piece. I don't know that you can do that easily. And I guess, and the other piece that I always look at as I go around and I'm visiting one of the SPED programs tomorrow, is to say, where's our density of personnel? Is it sufficient in some areas? Is it overly abundant in other areas? I don't know how you can find that out in HR, but I'm looking at, things like, who's working with the kids directly, how much of that's going on, how much of our personnel is working on teaching the teachers, those kind of layering of personnel, so that, when we start saying this is what happens, and, not to eliminate, and I'm not saying let's cut anything related to central office, or because how much of that stuff do we have to keep moving? Is any of the stuff in central office that is redundant or, should be better in the schools, or things in the schools that should be better in central office? Those are the things that I think of when I think of what we're going to look at the budget. So I don't know if that's what you guys want, but that's what I thought.
Super. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
I have a few areas, and I don't know if we've done any work yet to investigate, but one is our use of ed techs. I have come more and more to an understanding that the way we use ed techs is not conventional across the country, and I'm wondering if and I also believe the research is not there to suggest that ed techs, while I know they provide such an essential role in so many different capacities, but in our classrooms, I believe the research does not support that they are helping, they're directly benefiting our students' educational success. So I'm wondering if, and they're also among our lowest paid employees, so I'm wondering if there's a way to differently deploy ed techs in our district. I also am wondering, we passed a resolution earlier this year to require that all of our educators have some level of ESOL credentialing. And I'm wondering if, given that we've acknowledged that we've crossed a tipping point where all of our educators need to have the skills and experience and knowledge to teach ESOL, I'm wondering if there is a more efficient and successful, potentially successful way to staff our classrooms that better integrates our English language learners. So those are two ideas.
Super, thank you. Okay, we have 4 minutes left in this section. Julie, I see you, but I have a couple that I want to bring up and then we'll go to you. So I would be interested in terms of, Helene, you were talking about, not necessarily questions about savings, but also just better understanding the information that we have from when we went through this last year. I remember being a little bit confused about some of the documentation that was available to us. The labels are not always intuitive. For example, I saw transportation and thought it meant one thing, but it really means, driving kids to sporting events and like that. So as an example, it'd be super to be able to get a little bit more clarity on what all the line items actually are. That'd be great. I'd be interested in, two things that have sort of been in conversation historically that I think might warrant a little bit of reflection or research for this go around would be staffing models. I keep hearing the phrase the middle school model and how we staff our high schools. I'd be interested in more information about that. And then also the topic of the central office building itself, what the carrying costs are for that. And just what the financial implications are of that. I know that's been discussed in the past, but I'd welcome sort of some research around that particular issue. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you. Just one comment. I don't know that I really understand or agree with class size calculations. And so I would like that to be something we talk about, because I think we need that. However we handle teacher to student ratios needs to be really thoughtful.
Just to clarify, Board Member Opperman, are you asking about that from a policy perspective or from a budget perspective, or both?
Well, I think it's first off, why. Yes, it's policy, which I'll bring up in that committee, but it is a financial piece that saying, how much by increasing what's the cost, building cost, personnel cost to go from 15 to 18 to 20 to 22 to 26, and that I don't know that, again, Helene, I don't know if that's something that.
Yep. And sorry to talk over you, but I imagine that would overlap and dovetail with the ed tech review conversation, because it's not just teachers in the rooms with the students. So good stuff. Okay, any other questions before we move on to the rest of the agenda? Wonderful. Hey, 5:29, here we go.
Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, because now we're going to talk about the year-to-date budget, or the year-to-date for FY24. So let me take share screen. You can see that, right?
We're seeing the meeting notice right now.
Meeting notice?
You had it up for a second. You said it.
Oh, okay. I know what I did. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No worries.
I tried to move it so that it was in front of my camera, and I guess that's a big no-no. Trying to see what screen I'm on now. I just lost my 1 second. I'm so sorry. I know we're like on a time constraint here, and I'm like,
no problems.
It's all good. It's all good.
We can have a couple more minutes after.
Here we go. Okay. Sorry about that.
Success.
Yes. So what I did is I have tried to find a way that kind of gives us a better idea of what's going on with our current year. Like you had mentioned, a lot of the verbiage that we use in our financials does not help us in making an understanding of what we're looking at. And I found that to be true myself as I was, exploring through the way we set up these accounts. It was bogging down the system just so that I can run all the lines. It just for us, we have over 16,000 accounting type account strips. I don't know if that's basically the coding that we use to just code something specific. And I've never seen that many account numbers in my life before. Like, it is so finite and so detailed, something I'll probably start working on so it's not so cumbersome to review and put information and data together. So what I try to do is I try to break down the information by funding source. So when I speak funding, I'm speaking from this respect of from an accounting term that is used. The fund is basically our different buckets of where we get our money from. So in this instance, the screen what I'm sharing with you right now is our revenues, and the top line is the Maine general fund account. This is the fund that we usually bring forward for approval, where the majority of all of our reoccurring expenses come out of. So as you can see, as far as collections, we're doing well as far as how much we have in revenues. Same thing with the other accounts. So what I did with the rest of the funds is I kind of condensed them into like funding. So for instance, all of the adult ed programs, they have a whole bunch of little different programs. I try to condense them into one. Other is just some grants, little grants here, or some donation funds that we received that we're keeping track of, or small grants that were received, because some of the language that we have is, even if a school gets a grant that's over $2,000, the school district manages it. So I kind of lump that into one here. And then I put Perkins and your career technical together, and then IDEA, which in our system is called local entitlement. And then our ESSER funds, our title funds. Our title includes Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. And then I put pre-K and CDS, or Child Development Services, together. CDS is not really a grant. It's just a reimbursement type of program that we have. And then at the last line you'll see is food service. So now I'm going to go ahead and move to expenditures. I'm going to kind of talk. What I did is I put a link here on the side, and also in board docs, there is an attachment that gives you the reports in more detail. But before you look at those, there's some explanation I have to provide to you. So one of the things that I found through this process is that a lot of the grants did not have the budgets built into it, because a lot of the grants are not already approved from the state level, so they haven't been put in the system yet. But for right now, I'm showing you just the general funds expenses broken down. This was adopted, this was approved. Here you have 2024's budget expenditure by category, and here we are with our actuals. And as you can see, the only one that seems to stand out is this line which is your other costs, even when you compare it to your previous years, which is why I also provided this so that you could see our alignment to where we are. And a lot of, in this case, we purchased, which was budget approved, it was 6 school buses that were purchased at the beginning of the year. So we're not going to see this escalate into 25%, then 50% by quarter. Again, this is through September 30th. So did we have any questions on just the general fund, or did you want me to just keep going and then take questions at the end?
I think questions at the end. Makes
Okay.
sense. Yep.
So these are the rest of the funds. Now, again, this is the expense side now of these, what I call special revenues. That's the way it's accounted for when you're looking at different funds. These are the other buckets outside of the general fund. Again, categorizing it by the standard categories. And when I say personnel, you're talking about both wages and benefits. Your contracted services can be anywhere from utility costs to, when I say utilities, you're talking about your electricity, your phone bills. It could be, adding additional personnel. It could be hiring contracted services for special needs, those type of things that happen here. This is what your contracted services will be. And again, your supplies, and then everything else of your other costs. So one of the things I had to do in order to be able to provide you some information that you can compare your actuals to your budget is I had to work with two of our grant employees here that work with the grants. And we dug through a lot of the DOE information online so that I could put the budget information in. So when you review the more detailed report that comes out of Munis, you're not going to see the budgets yet. We're still working on creating that. But for presentation purposes, I wanted to provide you, like for here, for instance, we have no budget information yet for the IDEA grants or your local entitlements. So we're waiting for that to happen. And the same thing for the workforce down here. We're waiting for those budgets to come through from the state. But overall, again, when you're looking, even with those budgets not being there, we're in line as far as expenses overall. This line, this grand total, includes all of our funding types, which includes our operating and general fund. It will include these lines as well. And again, these funds outside of the general fund are supposed to cover expenses other than the ESSER fund, which is right here. It's supposed to cover items outside of what is an everyday operational cost to the school district. So as you can see here in our ESSER fund, right, we were discussing earlier about what we thought that looked like as far as the our shortfall is. Just in evaluating how much we're putting into ESSER, there's $9 million there that we're displacing from the general fund into a different funding source outside of our operating account. So I'll, at this time, kind of leave it open for some questions.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Helena, I just trying to get my head on why we don't have the information from the state. Is that when we're looking at the IDEA local entitlement, is that the EPS calculation?
No, IDEA is a specific federal through state grant for ESE students. And so from my understanding from staff here, the budget is not put into the system until it's approved at the state level.
Okay.
Something I'm going to change moving forward, because these are like entitlement funds that we know we're going to get from year to year. It's just a matter of what that amount's going to be. So there's always a starting point, and we could always at least put a budget of a specific amount in. In my past life working at the school district, this was always put in at the beginning. The issue is that for the state of Maine, we're running on a budget process that starts in March, and we're supposed to be done, or actually it doesn't even start in March. We start in January, and then the superintendent is supposed to provide his first budget in a March meeting. Well, when I worked for the state of Florida, we actually didn't start our budget until July. And that's only because the federal government doesn't even know how much they're going to appropriate when it comes to these specific federal grants. And then that's why we're behind when it comes to how much of that we're going to be putting into the system as what was approved from the state.
I think I understand what you just said.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just basically all the timing is really off. For the state of Maine, because we're working simultaneously with the town or the city, we're expected to bring forward a budget before even the federal government is aware of where they're going to appropriate the funds.
All right. Appreciate that. Thanks.
I have a question. Helene, thank you so much for, walking us through this. I'm curious which, if any, line items in terms of the budget to actuals for FY24 you are watching most closely. And is there anything that's not where it should be, or, which line items are you paying attention to most closely from that perspective?
I'm mostly concerned, honestly, with just reviewing and keeping my eyes on the general operating funds. All of the rest of the funds should be self-sufficient, and for the most part. But the only reason why is because we're, the majority, as you can see, of our funding is personnel and benefits.
Yep.
So something Ryan actually has made sure that we're looking at and determining whether or not, looking that next year we're going to have a shortfall because of ESSERF, and then the changing of our funding from, state level to local level, that we need to be looking at in particular personnel and where we are with that, as far as what the plan is now, so that we have the time to do things in a thoughtful process.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Opperman, do you have a new question, or?
Oh, it is a new one.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a new hand raised.
No, I understand. Yeah. I understand. Yeah, I get between that button and that other button. Oh my gosh! Now I'll come back to it. I'm sorry. It had. So I guess, no, I'm just going to have to rethink it, because whatever it was brief, short, and gone.
Sure. So, okay. And just, it's a good reminder to express gratitude to Ryan and the whole team for being so available between meetings as well. If questions come up, I really appreciate the fact that you are available to answer questions. Go for it, Julie.
Okay, it had to do with all the extras, the BerryDunn extras, the setting up ADP extras, things that we did not budget for last year, because it was just some of it we did, but we had no clue what was happening and what was going on. So my question is, where does that is that the money coming out of contracted
Contracted services, yes.
Okay. And is that one that's going to be a problem? Do you think at the end of the year that we have to shuffle things here and there?
I don't necessarily think it's going to be a problem, because, at the same time, BerryDunn was also helping with covering for positions that we clearly could not hire for and fill. So I think there's some offset there to some vacancies in positions that we're able to, meet, fill in whatever extra we're paying there with. At the end of the day, I'm sure based on where we're looking right now, first quarter, I don't have any concerns that we will be out of budget, because what might have happened is we could have also, and I'll look deeper into this as we move along into each meeting that we do, but we can keep what I'm showing here is that there is no concern there right now at the moment.
Thank you. Just a thought.
Wonderful. Seeing no other questions, it looks like it's time to again express gratitude for all that great information and talk about collaboration with the city. Ryan, go ahead.
Gonna keep it with Helene.
Okay, super.
So one of the things that we've begun doing with the city is we are starting to meet with them on a monthly basis. We actually met with them today, and we've provided this calendar, and it's actually in draft form right now on board docs as well. What they had advised us is that because of the change in their council, that most likely some of the dates might change by a couple of days. So that's why we have not officially posted what our calendar for next year's budget looks like. One of the big ones that they just advised us of today was that the CIP timeline is maybe pushed out due to the, again, change in the committee that with the new council members that they're going to have. And so, but from the perspective of still meeting the budget deadlines, we still made sure that we included time for us to meet as a committee, as well as, having time in there for community and for the staff. Ryan, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it. So, the two big things are from a collaboration. We're meeting staff to staff now, just to be clear, staff to staff on a monthly basis in the city. And Helene have been great in that collaboration so far, and it's been great to see. But that is really in a large part about how do we work together on a month-to-month basis, because there's such an intertwining of our finances and our systems. And so that piece is going on. And then second, as Helene said, we've put together, based on the calendar last year, a couple of changes in processes, as well as initial feedback from the city, what we anticipate as a calendar, and they are not final. So we could go to print with ours right now. They have more turnover on the finance committee and board level, or the city council level on their end. And so we are waiting for them to confirm. And truthfully, we probably won't have that confirmed and finalized until around winter break.
Makes sense. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate that level of collaboration. I know how needed it is and think it will strengthen our budget process, but our work overall. So really appreciate that. I do want to ask my counterparts on the school board. In the past, including I know last year, the current and previous city manager and mayors have preferred to start our budget process by holding a closed door meeting with the school board chair and finance committee chair and the mayor and city finance chair to essentially tell us what our budget should be. And I really want to encourage us not to do that, to ensure that we are engaging the public and having a transparent process and not engaging with closed door meetings where rather than going through the process as is written out here, where we're talking about our students' needs. The city is telling us what our budget should be and where they hope that we will come in. So I really encourage us to ensure that our process is transparent and involves the public when public officials, when we're involved, when the city councilors and mayor are involved.
So I will say that last year's budget process, I don't recall that the type of discussion that you're describing I don't recall that happening at the beginning of last year's process. So.
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I can confirm that did not happen.
Yeah.
Okay, and I apologize. That was what I thought had happened and what had happened every year prior to my being chair. The city just brought us in and told us what our budget should be, and I think that is not best for our students. It's not best from a public policy making process, nor from a public accountability process and transparency.
No disagreement from anybody on the Zoom.
Just for some clarity, the collaboration that we're speaking of is more from an internal perspective, the communication, the understanding of where we are with processes, only because what we do affects them at the end of the day, and making sure that we help communicate what we're I would say, like, the holdbacks. For instance, when you heard from BerryDunn, who thought that the goal was to be done and audit ready by October 31st, but realizing that we're probably going to go well into the end of November. So it's just kind of strategizing with them and letting them know ahead of time for things like that are happening. The other piece is, I'm not used to the format that we work in, so I also use it as an opportunity to ensure there isn't reporting that is expected for me to do for the school district that they would do normally. For instance, bond reporting, there's this Emma reporting that we have to do that's required, and I just want to make sure that it gets done. So it's more of a collaboration of ensuring that I have a clear understanding of what they need from me and what I need from them in order for each of us to make sure we're all doing things on a timely basis.
Yeah, super.
Sorry, that relationship is so critical, and I really value that work that you're doing and the relationships that you're building. I think it's essential, and I think it's been missing in the past, and so I really deeply appreciate that. I was speaking to a different level of interaction, which has been hurtful to us in the past. Where the city is essentially telling us what we need our budget to be. So just wanted to use the opportunity of talking about our work with the city to raise this issue. And again, it seems like it's not how it happened last year. And so I appreciate that. And thank you for that clarification to the Finance Committee Chair and School Board Chair.
Sure. Board Member Youssef, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Aline, and everybody who give us a lot of important information. I just want to echo how important it is to collaborate with the city. Previously, we learned that they offer support and we didn't accept. And that kind of disconnection, as Aline mentioned, we share a lot of things. The budget, and we have a common need to collaborate. So I'm really encouraging that collaboration to get into training, support with finding experience, and making sure that we strengthen that relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, and that narrative that we, when our payroll crisis was starting to unfold, did not accept help was not what happened. It was what the Press Herald wanted to say the story was. But as folks know, we worked very closely with now Mayor-elect Mark Dion as the payroll crisis was unfolding. But then the bottom line here is just how critical it is that we develop at the staff level close relationships, and then when we're working with the public officials, that we're doing so in a transparent way that involves the public.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns to voice in the 4 minutes we have remaining? I want to once again express my gratitude. This was a chock full of information these last 90 minutes. I really appreciate all the work that went into preparing that, and a really good conversation on all agenda items. So I want to express my gratitude for everybody's engagement as well. All right. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Thank you. And because it's a committee, we're just going to do show of hands. Wonderful. We are adjourned at 5:57 p.m. Have a good night, everybody.